Thank you, everybody. I didn't realize they were going to play that song, Don't Take It Personally, but that's very applicable to what I'll be talking about today. If we don't take something personally, well, how do we take it? And that's going to be a question that I'm going to pose to everyone today. Before I get started, everyone should have some sticky notes. And Carol, if you're watching at home, if you could grab even just like a small scratch piece of paper or something. And then does everyone have a pen to write with? I have a couple extra pens. If anyone needs one. Do you need one, Randy? I'll make it you. Do you have an extra one?
Yeah, I have one.
And Carol, if you're at home, if you want to grab a pen real quick. Do you have one? Okay. And okay, everybody has one. We'll use this in just a second, and it's not a whole lot that we'll need it for, but. So welcome and thank you everyone for allowing me the opportunity to be here and speak today. This is a fun topic today, and I had a lot of fun putting this together and preparing it because actually, and there are no coincidences in the universe, this is a topic that I've been meditating on myself for about the past month and trying to understand it for me personally with my own inner journey and to understand this at a deeper level. And the topic that we have been playing with for this month, and I know this is my first time here in a month, but is this idea of playing with paradoxes. What is a paradox? How do we play with it? And the topic today specifically, this is kind of interesting, is this idea of tyranny of the or. Tyranny of the or. Now, when I read that, I'm like, what exactly? Like, what does that mean? And I had to look up the word. I know what tyranny means, oppressive government or something like that. And I had to look it up again, and I'm wondering, I'm asking myself, well, whoever put this talk together, oh, thank you, Chris. Whoever put this talk together, why did they use the word tyranny? And then when I got done preparing my notes and I thought about that and I meditated on that a little bit, I went, oh my goodness, that's absolutely genius. It's the perfect word that you could use. And I'll tell you why towards the end, or when we get to the end of my talk, I'll tell you why we did that. But so we are asked to explore this idea of the tyranny of the or the word or. And what they're inviting us to examine is this idea of this or that. Can something be this or that? In other words, can something be hot or cold? Can something be up or down? Can something be tall or short? Can something be large or small? And so what we're going to do right now, we're going to take a quick look at this. So on your paper right here, if I can get mine here, with your pen, I want you to draw a line on this. I'll draw one on here. Okay, and it doesn't have to be long. It can be, an inch or 2 inches, just a line.
Up and down?
Just, yeah, straight up and down. Just a simple line. And don't draw it all the way from top to bottom.
Okay.
So, yeah, I should maybe be a little more clear in my direction.
There you go.
Now the question becomes, is this line here tall or short? Is it tall or short? And of course, we have nothing to compare it to. How do we know if something is tall or short unless we have something to compare it to? How do we know if something is hot or cold unless we have something to compare it to? Now what I want you to do, without touching that first line that you drew, without touching it, I want you to make that line shorter. Without touching that line. Little bit of a high school physics final question. Again, without touching that, and I'll give you the answer here in a second. Without touching that first line that you drew, I want you to make it shorter. And there's all kinds of different ways you can do it, okay? So I see some of you have figured it out already, and I'm going to do it. So everyone see my first line here, right? Okay. So I'm going to make this line shorter. I'm going to get I got my magic fairy dust in here. Hold on a second. I got to sprinkle it on here. My magic fairy dust has been sprinkled. Now, is that line shorter?
I can't see it from here.
Can you see it?
I disagree with it.
Can you see it from that far? Okay. Watch, look what she did. She got it. So I know, Dell, you got it. Can you see that, Julia? Okay, yeah. So there's more than one way to do it. So now that first line that we drew, is it tall or is it short? Which one is it? So to answer that question, we still need to look and examine that first line that we drew again. So that first line that we drew, not the second one, but the first one, this time I want you to make that first line that you drew, again, without touching the line, I want you to make it taller. I want you to make that first line taller, again, without touching that first line.
Excuse me, could you hold that up to the screen so I can see your
Oh,
answer?
I'm sorry, Carol. Yeah, can you see that? I just gave you the answer, but.
Okay. Thank you.
And so I made the first line, I made it taller by drawing a line next to it that makes it taller, or that makes that line shorter. And then I made that original line taller by drawing another line next to it that makes it shorter. Can everyone see
shorter
this?
line next to it, yeah.
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 Okay. Can you see this in the back there? Okay. Okay. Now the question that I'm asking and that we're asked to look at today, this idea of the tyranny of the or, is that line is that first line that we drew, is it tall or is it short, or can it be both? Can it be both tall and short at the same time? And this is the idea of playing with the paradox that we are asked to examine. Can a paradox, something that is seemingly opposite, two opposing energies, can it occupy the same space and the same time? Well, let's look at this in the real world, in our everyday lives. How does this little example that I just did apply to the real world in our everyday lives? Let me think of an example. For example, Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's or cancer. We tend to think of these things as an illness or a disease. I've heard the word disease used to describe cancer and Alzheimer's. Is Alzheimer's and cancer a disease, or is it a blessing? Can it be both? Can it be both? What's another example? Let's say you lose $50,000 through whatever, an investment or something. You lose $50,000. That's a lot of money. Is that a tragedy or is it a triumph? Can it be both? Can it be both a tragedy and a triumph? Let's say, let me give another example. Let's say a common situation that someone anywhere on this planet might encounter an accident. We'll just say a car accident. We'll say a non-life-threatening type of a car accident. Okay? Is that accident a burden, a nuisance, or is it a help? Can it be both? Can something be this and that? Can something be tall and short? Those are kind of three common everyday examples, but let me push the status quo a little bit here. Let me challenge what we think about the world today. 9/11. Everybody knows what I mean by 9/11. Was 9/11 an act of terror or an act of harmony? An act of coming together? Was it both? The current situation, Israel and Hamas. Is it a humanitarian crisis or is it a humanitarian breakthrough? Can it be both? And again, the question that we are being asked to look at today is this idea, does it have to be this or that? Well, I've got somebody online there. Or can it be both? Can something be both a humanitarian crisis? Dr. Laura there. Can something be both a humanitarian crisis and a humanitarian breakthrough at the same time? Can it be both? So this is the great paradox. That's two seemingly completely opposite energies, an act of terror and an act of compassion, an act of harmony. Can they occupy the same space at the same time? Our Science of Mind from our notes this week answers that question this way. It says, turn towards the condition and deny its power over reality. In doing that, we not only deny the condition, but also support those suffering from its effects in rising above it and moving forward. In this way, we can use the power of our mind to not only look away from, but also transform the aspects of our world that are not working for everyone and truly build a world that works for all. Now imagine that. Using the power of our mind to build a world that works for all. How amazing would that be? But let me, for a moment, narrow that down just a bit. Can we use the power of our mind to create a world that works for us, for me, starting with me? Change begins with us, right? And the answer is, yes, we can. And how do we do that? This is where life gets exciting. This is where, as they say, life begins. Life doesn't begin at the edge of your comfort zone. Life begins with the power of your mind and your thought. You have an event going on in your life. You have an event somewhere in the world going on at this time, and you're asked to think about that event. You create a thought about that event. This is where the power of the mind comes in. The question is not, do you create a thought about that event? The question is, what is your thought about that event? Is your thought, this is an act of terror, an act of tragedy? This is a burden. This is an illness. This is a problem, a challenge? Or is your thought, this is a blessing? This is a bringing together. This is an act of compassion. And again, the question is, can it be both? And the answer is yes, it can be both. When we understand what is the heart and principle of our philosophy here at Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes teaches us that when we change our thinking, we change our world. And when we understand that, yes, something can occupy the same space at the same time, because of what? Because everything we say here is God. When we start to look at life from this perspective, that it's not this happening, it's not that happening, it's God happening. It's life happening in the process of life. And as we read in our opening oneness prayer, there is one life, and it is the life of God, and this is my life now. That event, whatever it is that's happening in my life, that's happening in your life, we have a choice, the thought that we get to create about that. And it's our thinking about that event that creates our inner world. It's our inner world that creates our outer world. We want to change the world, we can start with ourselves, and the way we start with ourselves is to start with our thinking. And when we do that, who knows, maybe, just maybe, then we can bring it to the world. We also say that life is health, it is abundance, it is love. There is one life, and it is the life of God. So when we examine, again, this idea of a paradox, two things occupying the same space at the same time, when we look at that, not from my limited point of view, but when we look at that from the point of view that life is happening as is, that this is God in action. And therefore we see that yes, it can be both a burden and a blessing at the same time. And now comes the even funner part. If you want to have fun with life, this is how you do it. You take those two seemingly opposite thoughts. It's a burden, it's a blessing. It's both. But you take those two opposite thoughts, and what does Ernest Holmes say to do with one of those thoughts? We'll label the burden as a negative thought. He said, take that thought and throw it away. If you want to learn to master your life, you learn to master your mind. And you take this thought, this is an act of whatever, this is an act of retribution, this is an act of terror. It's okay to have that thought. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it would be hard to argue with that, especially what just happened with Israel a couple of weeks ago. How could anyone argue that is not an act of terror? But we're asked to go above that, to go beyond that, to go past that. And see, where's the act of love in this? Where's the act of compassion in this? And we take that thought, just as Ernest Holmes says, that burden, that negative, we toss it away. We get rid of it. We refuse to allow it. That's when, do we control the tyranny of the or does it control us? If we want to be, I'll say this, in control, if we want to have that life that works in here so that it works out there, then this is what we must do. What Ernest Holmes says, we take that thought and we throw it out. This is what Ernest Holmes says. Life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. And so what else does Ernest Holmes says then? When you have that event that's happening, we talk about any event in our life. To give you an example, memorial services. We tend nowadays in our culture, our society, we have raised our collective consciousness that we rarely say funeral or memorial service. But nowadays we say what? Celebration of life. We say celebration of life. What if we change the word life to event? Celebration of event. What would that do to your life right here, right now? If you just made that one little change in that word. And if we did, again, what Ernest Holmes says, what he asks us to do, that when we have that event, that we not only throw out the burden that we may think it is, the nuisance, the whatever, the tragedy, that we not only focus on the blessing, but we focus on that highest idea about this. I unfortunately learned this the hard way. And what I'm hoping with this talk today is to help you learn the easy way. 12 years ago, I lost my house. My house was foreclosed on. Now, that's not for, oh, so sorry, blah, 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 because there's not a person on this planet anywhere that has not had something happen to them. Everybody, everywhere, in every part of the globe, even if you're in the farthest remote regions of Norway or wherever, the Yukon of Canada, undoubtedly you have faced something in your life. But when that happened, my thinking about that event went automatically to what? Oh, this sucks. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. How could the system do this to me? Blah, blah, blah. This isn't fair. Oh. Now, nearly 12 years later, I realize what? It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Because now I'm here. I get to be a part of the Tulsa Center for Spiritual Living. I've gotten to explore new jobs, new countries, new experiences that I never would have had the bank not taken my house. But my point is, yes, it's a burden and a blessing, but don't wait 12 years to see it. Why wait 12 years to see it like I did? When you have that event going on in your life, it's not an event. Celebrate that event. Because somewhere, as Ernest Holmes asked us to do, see the highest good in that event. See that good for what it is really meant to be. I just read this from Eckhart Tolle. Whatever event you have going on in your life is the event that you're meant to have right here and right now to teach you, to guide you, to lead you to whatever is next in your life. When we look at it from that point of view, then are we using the power of mind to change who? Change us. And when we change us, the last time I talked about dropping a pebble in a pond. You create that ripple effect. By changing us, maybe we can change our friend. By changing our friend, maybe we can change 2 or 3, and so on and so forth. Ernest Holmes also states this. He says, all the power of the universe is with you. Feel it, know it, and then act as though it were true. Not as though it were true, because it is true. When we see ourselves for who we really are, whatever is happening out here is a reflection of what's going on in here. What's going on in here is a reflection of that thought that we are having, because we don't see, because we're locked in this tyranny of the or. It's this or that. But the truth is, it's this and that. And why is something this and that? Something is both tall and short. As you saw with that line is both tall and short at the same time, because it's God guiding. That event that is happening was placed at the right time, at the right space for you to help your journey, whatever it is that you need. I want to read this from our Science of Mind notes. We can either continue to hold on tightly to beliefs, ideas, and systems that we know are no longer working for us, or choose to willingly let go and embrace the as is, the God guiding. The question is not whether it will be painful or not. It most certainly will. The question is, how much are we going to allow our attachment to the old to cause us suffering? And as numerous spiritual teachers over the years have stated, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Suffering is optional. And so let me start to wrap this up here. The question then, the tyranny of the or. It's not this or that. It's this and that. Our challenge is to go forward and celebrate the event for what it really is. For God guiding, for God being in action. Thus, two polar opposite forces playing with the paradox can occupy the same space at the same time. My job, your job, everyone's job is to see the events of our lives happening for what they really are, for happening as God guiding. Knowing that it is God guiding, that God is all work creating the perfect moment each and every time. You see, we can use our mind. We can use the power of our mind to think about that event as evil. We can use the power of our mind to think about that event as good, as a blessing. Which one we use determines whether the tyranny of the or controls us or whether we control it. And so the word tyranny, I asked at the beginning, why would they use that word? It seems like such a harsh word, tyranny. If you think about it, again, it means oppression, to control. Ruthless government, the tyrannical government. But here's the question. Are you in control of your life, or is God in control? Or is it both? Think about that. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you. It was an interesting speech for me, to read and research. Because like I said, that's something I've been working on a lot in my own life. I used to only see something either or.
Stop recording.
Oh, thank you.
Multitasking
Multitasking here.